Bandwidth for changelog is provided by Fastly. Learn more at fastly.com.
I'm Blake Mizerany, and this is Go Time.
It's Go Time, a weekly podcast where we discuss interesting topics around the Go programming language, the community, and everything in between. If you currently write Go or aspire to, this is the show for you. We are back for another episode of Go Time. It is episode number 21. Today's show is sponsored by Linode and Code School. On the show today, we have myself, Erik St. Martin. We have Carlisia Campos. Say hello, Carlisia.
Hi, everybody.
And Brian Kettleson.
I love it when you say hello, Carlisia. It sounds like we're trained animals.
And then our special guest today is a true OG, original gopher, Blake Mizerany. How are you, Blake?
Good. How are you?
Doing good. So you've been around since 2009, 2010, I think you started with Go?
2009, yeah. The Google and released Go. I immediately took notice and haven't really looked back ever since.
And these days you're doing all Go, right?
Yes, correct.
And I'd love to kind of hear like how you've seen both the kind of language, the usage of the language, and the community, the demographic of the community change kind of over time, because you've been around since kind of it was first released and it was kind of people poking at it till now, which is almost everything being done in the distributed systems world is being built with Go.
Yeah, I mean, early on when I first saw Go, I took notice as I was working at Heroku, where we were building and working on a lot of distributed systems. And the appeal to me was mostly because everything we had done up until that point at Heroku and continued to do after that was a lot of Ruby. And it wasn't really holding up for us as well as we hoped. We'd spent most of our time fighting fires with it and not getting the performance out of it that we had hoped we'd be able to achieve. And Go really struck me as this language that would solve a lot of the problems. In fact, my colleague at the time, and he's also an OG gopher, Keith Rarick, and I really started playing with Go together. And you know, we just before it was released, we both went to one of the founders of Heroku and said, you know, we really probably should start looking into building a language for distributed systems, and which was really dumb for a startup to really be thinking about. But you know, we were excited at the idea, and then like 2 weeks later, Go came out, and we looked at it and we're like, well, I guess we don't have to do this anymore. So
timing is everything.
Yeah. So we started using it pretty heavily after that. It took Heroku a while to adopt it, but Keith and I definitely used it for a lot of stuff.
These stories always fascinate me. When I found out that people were writing tests in Go were running so much faster than same size apps in Ruby, because I also came from Ruby on Rails. That was what got my interest. So I'm wondering with you, when you looked at Go, what looked at Go means? Did you do a dry run, or did you just jump in and hoped for the best and it worked out? If it was the first case, what did you do? Any benchmarking? How did your decision making go more specifically?
Well, we didn't have to do any real formal benchmarking. I mean, writing a quick little hello world in Go, compiling it and running it was that. I mean, just a few little pokes at it with a browser. If it was a web server, it was an obvious, you know, night and day difference from anything that we had written in Ruby. So, you know, it was pretty obvious at that point that was the direction that we wanted to go was to start using Go.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to say at that time in 2009 to just hit an endpoint in Ruby on Rails was still 3-digit response times, like 100 milliseconds, 150 milliseconds. So to drop down to single digit meant the world.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I was working on a small project at Heroku at the time when I really started to use Go. And one thing I noticed was that we needed some sort of, service discovery, and we needed some, like configuration management. And so Keith and I picked up the Chubby paper that Google had put out, and we worked on implementing our own multi-paxos implementation, since the only one that was really out there at the time was Zookeeper. In fact, I think that was the only one that was open sourced. Well, no, there were others, I think, some couple out of Berkeley, but we immediately looked at the design of Paxos and Go's, concurrency and how it just seemed to just meld together really well. And we were able to crank out a basic multi-Paxos implementation relatively quickly. And in fact, I remember after we did that, I immediately reached out to Rob Pike, sent him an email and said, hey, we built a multi-Paxos implementation in Go. We'd love it if you'd come take a look and let us know, what you think. And so he came by and took a look. I don't know where I'm going with this. I think I'm more excited about the fact that Rob showed up when I emailed him. But, but yeah, I mean, I think that was like it really spoke to the power of the language, was that, you can work on some pretty hard problems in it and come up with some reasonably simple solutions, and the language really allows for that.
Yeah, so I have a confession. It was Doozer that got me hooked into Go. I played with it when it first came out in 2009, but I didn't see the vision for Go yet. And then I saw Doozer and it blew me away. I realized that we could build all kinds of crazy stuff with it. And that's actually how Erik and I met. I fell in love with Go because of Doozer, and then hired Erik to do Go. And, it's kind of all downhill from there.
Yeah, Doozer was a lot of fun to play with in the beginning. And for anybody who's not familiar with it, it's a lot like Zookeeper and etcd and console of this generation. But there was a lot of functionality that it had that Zookeeper didn't, which is one of the reasons that we liked it. I want to say it had something to do with the way the paths were watched at a specific version or something like that.
Right. We did a persistent data. We used a persistent data structure to be able to track changes, so you could pick up where you left off during a disconnect or after a disconnect, which was pretty nice.
Yeah. So you could start watching a path at a certain point in time, which was really cool.
It was awesome for us because we were doing kind of some service discovery stuff and distributed systems. And when you looked at that, if you did Zookeeper, you would have to kind of resync periodically. If you lost your session, you'd have to reconcile the differences.
Right.
And you see kind of that mirrored now in things like etcd, where you whenever you get a listing of a path, you get back the specific version. That way you can start your watch from that point on. And
right. There's always that chance that you'll miss the window. If you go offline for too long, you'll have to resync, but it's more of a performance optimization. Still pretty cool.
So with that project, how much like Ruby baggage do you feel like you brought along? Because that kind of turns out to be the thing whenever you adopt a new language, is you bring.
Right. So one of the first things Keith and I wrote was an assert package for the testing suite. Not long after that, we implemented a small like Sinatra style router called Pat. And within probably 3 to 4 weeks after creating both of those, we ditched them and just never used them again and continued to use the standard library. Although I think Pat continues to be pretty successful. I haven't looked at it in a really long time, but I think Gorilla adopted it at some point. But I avoid a lot of those frameworks. I'm not really familiar with where they are, but yeah. So to speak to that, yes, we brought a lot of stuff over from Ruby earlier on. I was definitely looking. I remember looking for certain things to exist in Go that I was used to having in Ruby, and it took me a while to break that habit. But once I did, everything got better.
So yeah, I feel like for some of like the open source projects like you release into the world, like there's some of them I feel like I should go back and change the README to be like, I no longer use this, neither should you.
Yeah, I did. You go look at the Pat README. I think it literally says like, I don't use this anymore.
One of the first questions that almost everybody asks when they come to Go is, which web framework should I use? Which framework should I use for this? Which framework should I use for that? And it's really a strong question that we get, especially in the Go for Slack channel every day.
Yeah.
And I know you're kind of anti framework. What would your suggestion be to a new gopher coming in and wanting to write something? When it comes to just using the standard lib, that's kind of a hard message to tell.
Yeah, I don't really have a go-to answer for that. I think everyone has their own goals when they come to the language. So it really depends on what they're trying to do. I think when someone wants to write just like a simple, web app, they can certainly get away with just using the standard library. And the standard library will take you extremely far. In fact, I've never had to, or felt the desire to need a framework, and I've built some pretty big web apps and APIs. But I mean, I think some people are also looking for, I've got a checklist of things I need out of the box so that I can get started today. And, I don't have an answer for them on that, but I hear things about Gorilla or, Martini or things like that. But to answer your question, I don't know. I don't have an answer.
And I wonder too, I don't know how it is with the Python community or other communities, but with the Ruby community, the message was so strong. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't, write things yourself. If there's a library out there, use it. Always also the message of extract your code into a gem and use that, and also share with other people so they can use it. So I can see how people coming, at least from Ruby, would be immediately looking for a library or a framework, not so much because they don't want to write code, but because that was such a strong message.
Right. I mean, usually what I advocate in those scenarios is I go look for something that does what you're looking for and then copy and paste it into your code. Usually there's some, obviously I can give attribution as well, but usually what I see when people ask that is that they're looking for, a quick fix that there's something that's already, how do I phrase this? I think they're assuming the problem is going to be harder or the solution to their problem is going to be much, much harder and much more complicated than it really is. And so they, what I see is people will reach for something. I mean, for instance, one thing and not to point fingers at anyone, but I've seen libraries where people have written an entire library to do exponential backoff. And I mean, to me, that's a really simple for loop and a random sleep. It's nothing too complicated. But I see it. I see lots of, and what I see in those libraries also is that what they wind up doing is you wind up with something that's it's much harder to use and requires more code to use the thing than it would had you just implemented it yourself. So usually that's what I say. Is look at just like really dissect the problem down to what it really is and try to come up with the simplest solution, and a lot of times it can be solved with a for loop.
There is a very good point. I started writing an app, a greenfield app that I know is going to be in production sometime soon, and of course, my being new to Go, my first reaction was, well, let me look for some libraries that do this stuff that I haven't done since I worked with Java. I haven't done codes that directly access a database for ages because I had been working with Ruby and I had libraries that did that. I mean, Rails itself did that. So I was looking for that framework just to give me a little bit of an edge. So I didn't have so much of a learning curve. Like I'm learning things in Go still, and I don't want to be looking into all of that at the same time. But now that I'm very comfortable with what I'm doing, I'm thinking next project I do, I don't even want to use the libraries. I want to focus more on using the standard library, learning what the standard library offers, and be more intimate with that.
Right.
Because I think it's going to be to my benefit, knowing that, and also using idiomatic Go, and not depend so much on what framework is out there, because it might be that this framework would be good for this, and that framework would be good for that. No framework is going to be good for everything, and you might as well just know how to do it.
Right.
And like you're saying, I think your point is so good because it ends up not being that hard. Now, after I looked at it, I was like, okay, this is not that complicated.
Right.
I think you hit on it a little bit at a talk you did, I believe it was at .go a couple of years ago, where you talked about like predeterminism, like when you attack a problem and you think you already know what you need. And for most of us, especially when you come from, Python with Django or Ruby with Rails, you feel like, okay, I need to build a web app. I need a framework because that's what I'm used to having when I build one, instead of kind of starting to build it and figuring out what you want and what you need as you go along.
I mean, now on the other side of that, I wouldn't recommend implementing your own database driver or cryptography library or like bucketed rate limiting. I mean those types of things aren't like something you just kind of throw together pretty quickly and then be done with it. They definitely require quite a bit of thought. But the nice thing about those is that they have very specific problems that they solve rather than trying to solve every single problem. So
That's a fair point.
that's generally when I start, bringing things in and bringing dependencies in is when it's something like that.
If it's a problem that is only ever explained in formal papers, you probably want a library for it.
Right. I mean, I implemented the first Postgres driver for Go and for the database SQL package. And I'm here to tell you that it's not something you just want to do. I had to do it at the time because nothing existed, but I would have preferred someone else did it.
Yeah.
So that's a good question too, because you came in so early, and there weren't a lot of libraries existing already. So you kind of had to pave the way anyway. Do you feel like that kind of influences your desire to just kind of write it from scratch most of the time? Or is it really just you don't want the overhead of pulling in 10,000 lines of code to save yourself one for loop?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what we're trying to do. If we're, and by I say we, I mean us at Backplane, if we're, trying to get something done by the end of the week, there's no problem with bringing a dependency in, but we'll definitely reevaluate it pretty quickly, but there is this like strong urge a lot of times where I just want to like go off and say like, oh, I'm just going to do this myself. It sounds like fun, but I have to, definitely have to stop myself because a lot of things that people work on are hard problems. A lot of these packages out there, it's not worth rewriting. I don't know. Does that answer your question?
No, yeah, I definitely think it does. But yeah, there's a not invented here syndrome that people can get wrapped up into. But like you said, I think you just kind of have to be pragmatic about your decision of whether or not to pull in a dependency or rewrite it yourself.
Yeah, and be self-aware as well, just to make sure you're not doing it just to do it.
Unless you want to for fun.
Right. I mean, exactly. Sorry. There's some context needed there. I mean, if you wanted to do it for fun, then by all means, you're trying to get something out the door, or put something into production.
So I know we've only got a few minutes left with you because you've got a hard stop in a few minutes here. But my big question for you is around building a startup in Go. What advice do you have for other entrepreneurs who are considering using Go for startups?
I think they should. Again, but also depending on what it is they're trying to do. For us, it's been a real boon. We're extremely productive. We're working on a lot of distributed systems-y things here, and Go suits us extremely well and helps solve a lot of the problems with fairly relative ease, while also maintaining a lot of performance. But I don't know. It's a tough question. I mean, do you have any more context you can give me around your question, or?
No. I was just curious. Now that you've had almost a year in Go as a CEO of a startup, is there anything that you would change? Are you having a difficult time finding developers? Is the talent pool big? Is the language mature enough? Those are all questions that investors and entrepreneurs want to answer before they start to commit to something like a language.
Right. I think what's great about Go is that it's easy to learn. And so if you're having trouble finding people that aren't, as, senior as you might hope, the great thing about it is that people can learn extremely fast. So I did spend quite a bit of time. In fact, if I had to give any advice, I did spend quite a bit of time early on, and probably spent too much time early on trying to find really, really extremely seasoned Go engineers. And they're extremely hard to come by, and they're in very high demand. And so at some point, it turns out like you don't have to like go after those people. You can easily find people that are extremely, extremely intelligent and extremely willing to learn, and who are extremely hungry and want to learn, and they learn really fast when they're in that mindset. So don't try to go find the rock stars all the time. Like if you can get them, great, but it's the language itself lends itself to be learned very easily.
Very good. All right. Well, we know that you've got to go quickly, so we will say our thanks and goodbyes. We appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
It's been a lot of fun.
Thank you and bye.
Take it easy.
Oh, what a bummer that he had to leave so early.
I know.
Why do we all have to have jobs?
I know. Who wants to work? The good news is there's a lot of interesting stuff going on in the Go community, so we can talk a lot about all of the exciting things that have been happening. I've seen 1,000 cool Go projects this week.
Yeah, so before we kind of jump on this, why don't we talk about one of our sponsors, because this is a nice clean break, and then we can kind of jump into some interesting Go projects and news.
Well, that's a great idea. Why don't we shout out to Linode, because they're our favorite cloud server hosting platform. Linode is what Changelog has built their entirely new CMS platform on, and I bet we're going to talk about that a little bit before the end of the show too, because it's hot news. You can go over to linode.com/GoTime to get started. You get to choose your own flavor of Linux, the resources, and the location of the node you want to spin up. They have 8 different data centers across the world that you can choose from, and plans that start at just $10 a month for full root access to your VMs. So use the code GoTime20 to get 2 free months. That's $20 credit with unlimited uses, so you can tell all your friends.
Awesome. Now, what do I have to do to get free root access to your VMs?
Probably just steal an SSH private key.
So you had mentioned too that all of the new changelog stuff is hosted on Linode, which if anybody has not seen yet, you should go check out the new changelog site and the new GoTime FM site. Everybody, Adam and Jared and team, have been working tirelessly on this for I don't know how many months, and it is finally here, and it is fantastic. And also, it's backed by Fastly's CDN, which Carlisia is working for right now.
Yay! Yay, Fastly!
Fastly's awesome.
I'm excited because it's written in Elixir and Phoenix, and I would love to see the code. I know that in their blog post they mentioned that they planned on open sourcing it, so I'm really looking forward to seeing an implementation of a serious system in Phoenix, so that I can get a better idea of what that looks like. It's on my to-do list for this year to play with Elixir and Phoenix, because they seem like interesting technologies.
Yeah, so that's actually an interesting point that I forgot to mention, is that they're releasing all of this open source. So if you plan on running your own podcast or series of podcasts, you got the hookup from Changelog.
Yeah.
Well, but any CMS in general, this is a CMS that they put the podcast content on top of.
That's true. You could just use it just as a CMS. So Adam in the GoTime FM channel is saying they're still polishing some things up, writing the README and stuff, but it won't be long. If you're subscribed to Changelog Weekly, you will see it when it's announced.
If you're subscribed to Changelog Weekly, you'll see it at the top of the coolest GitHub repository list. Oh, that's the Changelog Nightly. Never mind. That's my trigger to go to bed. Did I ever mention that?
Yeah. So
Changelog Nightly comes out at like midnight every night. I'm like, oh shoot, it's time to go to bed.
See, I get all these newsletters, and there's always cool things in there, and I don't have time. And I'll have I'll typically have multiple browser windows open, which are kind of like context, like work and non-work. And then the non-work one is always full of all the tabs that come from these emails and Twitter and people sending me direct links. And then they hang out there, and there'll be 30 tabs, and then I'll look at 2 or 3 of them, and then eventually I abandon the rest because they've been hanging out there too long. So I just leave Brian to curate it for me. He tells me what the good stuff is.
Well, that's a problem. I've been so busy lately, I haven't even looked at most of the good stuff. I have a giant list of things that look interesting to touch and haven't played with them at all, which makes me sad. Although I did do something pretty cool this week that's kind of fun. I think I if you follow me on Twitter, you'd have seen it. I embedded a term.js terminal inside Go's present tool and hacked up the present tool to understand a syntax to open and create and attach to a Docker container so that you could have a live terminal embedded in your presentation. And that was probably the most fun hack I've done in months and months and months. It was so cool.
So does the name of this, when you open source it, is it going to have Hightower in it because it helps facilitate giving live demos like Kelsey?
I don't know. I've been trying to think about a name for it, and I wanted something with Frankenstein in the name for it because it's just this giant ball of spaghetti garbage code right now. At this point, I'm calling it present term, but who knows? Names accepted.
I think it was Brad that called you out on that he did it at the first GopherCon.
I saw that this morning. I was so mad. Here I was thinking I was trailblazing. Brad did it in 2014. Thanks, Brad. Shut me down.
There are no great inventions. Somebody else has already done it before you.
I know. Cranky.
So let's talk about some other news and projects that everybody's kind of run across this week. Carlisia, you got anything for us?
I do, actually. So I work a lot with APIs, and some time ago I Googled, I have this JSON, I have to write a struct for it. Maybe there is a way to convert the JSON to structs because, I'm lazy. And there was. I could not believe it. And it has such a nice UI. And when I looked at it, it was made by Matt Holt. And frankly, it's unbelievable how many things Matt does. And they're all of them, everything he does is so well done. Really love it. So it's JSON to Go. I will put a link on the show. It basically, you drop some JSON and you magically transform that into Go structs for you. Like, this cannot get any easier. And also, sorry?
I was going to say it's magical. I've used it dozens and dozens of times.
Yeah, right, because you do this all the time. You ping in an API, and you need to receive that into a struct. It's so handy to have that. You basically just copy the struct and put it in your code, and voila.
Mm-hmm.
In the same way, he has a curl to go tool where you paste the curl, let's say a call to an API, and it will give you the Go client to make that call, and you paste it in your code, and it will work. It's like magic. So thank you, Matt, for doing those tools.
Those are great. Good call.
So I've got a fun one that ran across that was created by Nate Finch. I want to say it's pronounced Gorham.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's like a command line application where you can kind of specify a package and then the method and parameters that you want to call all on the command line. So it's like writing single line Go apps from the command line, which is just ridiculously cool. And I've started writing some shell scripts using it because it's easier to do than Bash.
Yeah, it's crazy. You can call any standard live function and it will do all of the smart stuff to convert your Bash parameters into the correct types to make that call. And I think I said on Twitter, it's one of the coolest hacks I've seen in forever. It's really neat. So shout out to Nate.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the motivation behind creating it. Like, that's always the fun part for me is like you run across these projects that are really cool and you start playing with them. But I want to understand like what was going through somebody's head. Like, what was the problem he was trying to solve with this?
Well, let's get him on the show.
We should.
We should.
Nate's done a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
Noted. Nate Finch on the show. If you're out there, Nate, we're looking for you.
Wanted.
No is not an acceptable answer.
So I've got another one. I think it's Bjarne Erik Peterson released React and Go today, his Go React library for Gopher.js, and I played with it way back in December maybe of last year when it was really brand new. and it wasn't quite ready for prime time yet. And he's still kind of couching, saying that it is it's still not production ready, but the fact that he's released it to the public means it might be. So if you're not familiar with Go4JS, it's a Go transpiler that emits JavaScript, lets you use Go on the front end. And the Go React is a Go4JS wrapper around React. So you can write React apps without writing any JavaScript. And that, my friends, is a win.
That's really interesting because that typically is the way I'm doing web apps these days, is kind of thick client with React and Go on the API side. So it'd be interesting to see writing the React and Go. But I find like I'm not always a big fan of that, because even in the Ruby world, and Carlisia and Brian, you guys probably both remember this, but remember RJS?
Mm-hmm.
Where you kind of wrote the so this was I don't know whether it's still there, but it was pre-3. There was something called RJS where basically you wrote your JavaScript your JavaScript functionality calling into your app in your templates using Ruby, and it kind of generated JavaScript on the outside. And I was just never really a big fan of that. So it's kind of like doing the same thing, and you wonder how much you want to cross into the other side. But I'd be interested to see what the API for it looks like, because
it looks very Go-ish, and it's really not bad. The fundamental problem I have with it is that you have to understand React before you can use Go React. And in order to understand React, you've got to learn from all of the tutorials and places out there that are using the JavaScript version or the JSX version or whatever those are called. So, there's a disconnect, a mental disconnect when you're reading these tutorials on how you're going to implement that on the Go side of things. And that makes it a little bit harder. If you know React really well already, then it's probably not a big deal. But learning to use a transpiler like that gets complicated.
I think that falls into the leaky abstraction category, where you're trying to abstract some concept, but you still have to have some deep understanding of the thing you're abstracting.
Yeah.
All right, what else do we got?
So DigitalOcean just released a library called Go QEMU, and I never knew how to pronounce QEMU, but it allows you to interact with the virtual machines from Go. So you can launch VMs from either the host machine or over TCP across the network. You can start them, stop them, get information about them. So if playing with VMs is in your to-do list, there's a really nice Go wrapper for QEMU from DigitalOcean that was just released today.
Oh, interesting. I have not seen that at all.
It's interesting to me because I have been looking at ways to spin up VMs really quickly, and what timing.
All right, so that is now in one of my many tabs.
Yet another tab. It's like a to-do list that never dies.
So one thing I did want to touch on too is a new repo that Corey Lanou has been working on, which is kind of like this recipe for starting a meetup group, which I think is really awesome because we really need more of these happening around the country. It's great to spread out, to share our knowledge, and to get more people interested in the language we love, and to give people a forum to kind of dip their toes into public speaking and things like that. So I highly suggest everybody check that out if there's not a meetup group in your area.
Where's the repo for that?
I will drop it in the GoTime FM channel. It's Corey /Corey Lanou /Go -meetup.
Awesome.
Yeah, this repo is really fantastic. I haven't seen better suggestions for running a meetup than here. So
no, it's really the meetup Bible. I pointed somebody at it maybe 2 days ago. So it's good stuff. Go Corey.
Yeah, I might need to help expand this or something too, because I've had a goal since 2014, maybe even a little earlier, which is to kind of consolidate a lot of the lessons learned that Brian and I have learned from organizing conferences and stuff too, and maybe help people with a recipe to start, smaller regional events too, to kind of help. More stages is a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And now that I'm looking at it, just one comment I have for you, Corey. I know you are on Slack right now. Not every meetup has to be people presenting. For example, the meetup we do in San Diego, we don't do presentations. We get together in code as groups. And that is amazing. Everybody loves it. At least I have not seen anybody say I would prefer presentations. Everybody loves this format. So it's another option too.
And I think Brian and I are guilty of that too, because the Go Tampa meetup, I don't think we've had a meetup in a while. And it's mainly because we feel like it's hard to prepare presentations. We're always so busy. So trying to make the time to create presentations gets difficult. And then we don't end up scheduling a meetup. And really, I think people just want to hang out and talk Go. So I think we need to do a better job of doing stuff like that. Just, get everybody together and help each other with projects and problems that we're working on, or even if it's just beers and socializing and talking about Go. I think that there's still value in that. And I need to connect with that myself, that there doesn't have to be a presentation ready to run it.
And I stand corrected. There is a section on that repo that talks about other options other than having speakers. And I agree with you, Erik. I see people struggling to find speakers sometimes. So it's nice to know that you can do other things as well.
Yeah, so we had a Ruby meetup here that was doing a really cool thing, and I forget what frequency they were doing them on, but basically what they would do is they would pose a small problem, almost like the exorcism IO problems, and everybody would submit them anonymously to the meetup organizers, and then in order to attend, you had to have submitted. And then basically everybody would kind of sit there and together collectively code review all of the submissions in kind of like this anonymous fashion. So nobody had to feel guilty, that people were saying something about them personally, or would know that they made, some silly mistake or something like that. And it was actually a really cool idea. And it wouldn't be bad to try that in the Go world too, where people submit even exorcism IO problems and we get together in person and talk about it.
That's a great idea. When we talked to Katrina, she mentioned that one of the things that they really needed was reviewers. So we could actually do like a review-a-thon as a meetup topic, and sit down together and kind of use groupthink to think about the best way to attack a problem.
That's true. Like, not even have to have their own submissions. Just collectively as a group review other things. That's cool.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
With exorcism, you do have to do a submission for the exercise before you're able to comment on that exercise. So at least one person would have to. But I also see the benefit of everybody working on the exercise, submitting it, and then doing a review. Each person can add comments separately, but as a group.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I like this.
Yeah, just have everybody who's showing up as a prerequisite to submit this.
But you can also do that during the meetup, because a lot of times we don't feel motivated. That's just an extra thing that I have to do. But if you're in a meetup with a group of people, everybody doing the same thing, it's more motivating. Just a thought.
Good one.
Yeah, definitely something to play with. All right.
So I found another package that I bookmarked, and I'm just going through my GitHub stars to remind me of interesting things. This one is called GoConv, CONV, and it's by C. Stockton on GitHub. And it does reflectionless conversions from Go's native type. So you can convert a byte array to a string, or the word true to a Boolean, and it does it without reflection, and promises to be faster than the other kinds of things like that do it with reflection. So I'm kind of interested in seeing whether that is a useful package. I haven't played with it yet, so I don't have any opinions, but it's something we do a lot of, is conversions, and doing them well is never easy. So be an interesting one to take a look at.
I saw the headlines for that. Can we get a link, please, Brian?
Yes, I will drop it in the Slack, and There you go. So that's github.com/cstockton/go-conv. Looked interesting.
Yeah, I'll have to take a look at that and think of use cases where I don't typically just use like strconf or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has different pronunciations of these standard library packages. Like I'd love to get like a list of just, because you don't really say these things, right? So like everybody now knows it's thumped, right? But nobody knew that before.
I don't think everybody knows that still. The 1,500 people at GopherCon were all shocked the first time they heard that.
Yeah, I think people call it strconf for the I used to pronounce string.
Yeah, I don't know. I've had several strange moments where people pronounce package names, and I thought, I don't say it that way.
I will never forget the first time I heard thumped. It was from Katrina, and I was stumped.
You were stumped by thumped?
It was pronounced thumped. I'm like, really? I would never guess.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one.
So also, I don't think that it would be an episode of Go Time without me mentioning another database that I found written in Go. So this one's called SummitDB.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah, so it looked like it was built on top of BuntDB, which I think we may have mentioned before on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But it's basically backed by the Raft consensus algorithm, but it has kind of wire compatibility with Redis. But some of the cool things with it is spatial indexing, and that tends to be something that I look at a lot because people are doing more and more stuff like that with bounding boxes and trying to find things that fall within, the overlapping. So geospatial and indexing is really cool and can be useful in different types of projects. So I thought that was cool, and I think that it uses Auto, which is
JavaScript interpreter.
Yeah, you can bridge between JavaScript and Go. And I think that's kind of how they're using it for queries under the hood. But in my defense, I have not dug in too deep, but I knew that it does have a kind of Redis compatibility too. So I think that's really cool. And it's all in memory.
Yeah, that's pretty slick. And they claim ACID compliance, which is interesting. I wonder how fast it is if it's got Raft and ACID at the same time. Those two together sound kind of mutually exclusive. Fast plus Raft. You have to have consensus between machines, but you're getting consistency in an ACID database. There's got to be a trade-off there. Maybe the trade-off is no disk writes.
Right. So, and for anybody who's listening live, there's two ways you can get these links. We try to do our best while we're talking about these things to either drop the link in the GoTime FM Slack channel and on Twitter. So if you're following along on either of those, you should be able to find these links as we're talking about them.
At GoTime FM on Twitter?
Yes, at GoTime FM. Okay, so I think that it's about time for another sponsor break. Who do we got?
We have Code School today, which is kind of awesome. I think I mentioned last show that I had gone through their new Go course led by Carlos Souza. And you can go to codeschool.com/go, learn about the track or the course called On Track with Go. We really appreciate Code School sponsoring the show, and we're excited to see what this course covers. I was really impressed by the production quality of the show. It's got really good graphics and good presentation, and it's kind of an exciting program. If you're starting with Go and looking for a place to go, no pun intended, to do that, then head over to codeschool.com/go and take a look at that class called On Track with Go.
Code School has a history of doing kind of really kind of creative and engaging coursework. Like I still remember the Rails for Zombies stuff. It was one of the first things we were recommending in the Ruby world for people who are interested in learning Ruby on Rails.
That's the team over in Orlando, right?
No, that's MV Labs. What was the thing they created?
I thought they got bought by Code School. All right, now I got to Google it.
That's a very good question.
Don't make me Google it.
What was the name of their training thing?
It was NV Labs.
I think you're right. I think it was MV Labs.
They were bought by Pluralsight, no? Isn't that
Oh,
what you're talking
yes.
about?
so it wasn't.
That's what it was.
I had them confused. Not Code School.
Wait, no,
right.
you're right. MV Labs
MB Labs is Code School.
created Code School,
Ha!
and then that was bought by Pluralsight.
Don't mess with my memory. Just because I'm 45 years old doesn't mean I'm stupid. Just means I'm old and I can't see or hear.
So, but still, regardless of the history of Code School and
It's awesome
who now
stuff.
owns it, yeah, their training has always been really cool. And I just pulled up their site too. They've got a bunch more training stuff too, like surviving APIs
Nice.
with Rails for zombie outlaws.
I've subscribed to their courses for a long time when I was doing Rails. I'm looking forward to checking out this Go course.
Yeah, they've got great production quality, so it's good stuff.
Here we go. My brother is serving as your memory right now. He just messaged me and said he thinks the other one you were thinking about in Orlando is Treehouse.
No, I was definitely thinking about Envy.
Okay, so he is wrong.
But Treehouse is where Joe Steele worked.
Yes, somebody else went there.
Yeah, so now we're talking about Tampa people. Sorry.
So if you're from Tampa and you know Joe, you know who we're talking about.
Shout out to Joe.
So moving on to Free Software Friday. Who wants to go first this week?
I do.
All right.
Pick me,
Carlisia.
please.
Go, Brian.
So I want to shout out to the folks at CoreOS. I've been doing all over the place this week, doing training materials and spinning up Linux machines. And I realized that pretty much everything I did had a CoreOS component in it at some point this week. So shout out to all the folks at CoreOS and the people who help maintain CoreOS Linux, etcd, Fleet, Flannel, all of the great tools that CoreOS has been putting out in the open source community. We appreciate it. I know that they're building a commercial product on top of Kubernetes called Tectonic, but I'm happy that they work so hard to give back to the open source community while they're still trying to make a buck. I think that's a great business model. So thanks, CoreOS.
It's surprising when I look at kind of the stuff that they put out, like the amount of their own projects they're contributing. And like you said, there's even more that you haven't mentioned. They had a Claire, which does vulnerability scanning on containers, and so many things they're putting out, but they're also contributing back to, Linux kernel, systemd, like all these things. And it's hard to believe that this is actually a company that, is for profit.
Yeah.
Because it seems like everything they do is just kind of free to the world and helping out. So I think that we owe them a ton of gratitude for all the things that they're doing in the Go world and in the container and orchestration space.
Yeah, we didn't even mention Rocket and how much work they've done in Kubernetes.
Yes.
Good folks over there at CoreOS.
And how about you, Carlisia?
I want to give a shout out to coffee. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not, but I want to give a shout out.
Delightful alternative Red Bull.
It's amazing what 2 cups of coffee can do, I tell you. Anyway, I want to give a shout out to this repo that is called Stability Badges. Basically, it gives you SVG badges it says for Go projects, but I can't see why this couldn't be used for any project. And it lists the badges are things like experimental, unstable, stable, frozen, and hey Erik, deprecated. So it would be super nice if project maintainers could add badges to their repo so people know, hey, this is deprecated or this is active, stable, or experimental.
Oh, that is pretty cool.
It is, isn't it? It's
I like
crazy. Yeah.
Is there one that I could put on all of my projects that says warning, don't touch? Oh, there is. Experimental. Yeah, I'll just leave it there.
Yeah.
See, I'm looking for the one that says, I wrote this a really long time ago. I barely knew Go. It kind of worked. I'm doing other things now.
I'm better now.
I'm better now and I don't use it.
Stability status. Don't judge me.
Exactly.
I like that one.
I'm making my own badge.
There's always a PR. That's only a PR away.
That's true. My first pull request. Don't judge me.
All right, I'm gonna pull up the link for mine real quick so that we can kind of get a head start for anybody who wants to look at this, like while we're talking about it, because it does a lot.
This is crazy.
Yeah. So mine for today is called My Looking Glass, which is kind of abbreviated MyLG, but it's actually really cool because it's one tool, and this is all written in Go, but it does like ping, trace route. You can actually look up. You can do BGP and look up routes. Who is port scanning? You can look at peering information, DNS. Trying to think of everything else that this does. I think it does layer 2 kind of discovery, trace routes, TCP dump, but it's all
land
kind of
discovery. Like, I did MDNS discovery on my network with it like a week ago, trying to find a device that I couldn't find an IP address for. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool because it also kind of has an interactive kind of console that you deal with, and it's kind of all in one place. And I just find it interesting because many of the tools that we use for these like have just been set in stone for so many years. You just kind of lean on them all the time. So it's interesting to see people reapproaching that. And I find it even more cool that it's all written in Go.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to break my habit because I'm just used to typing dig or NSLOOKUP or, things like that. So I'm trying to nmap and stuff like that. So I'm trying my best to be like, no,
Netstat.
Yeah.
That's, I swear I use Netstat 16 times a day. Netstat-LNTP. Who the hell is listening on that port?
And you look at the man page for Netstat 20 times a day.
No, because I only use it for one thing, to find out who's listening on the damn port I'm trying to open.
So one of my all-time favorite Linux commands is lsov, the list open file.
List open files.
Yeah, that's awesome to be able to see who has a port or a file open, or to see what files your process has open. You can go the other way around too. So I think that's ridiculously cool.
Yeah, see, that's where I've used LSOF, trying to move a binary from one machine to the other and call LSOF to see which shared libraries it's using or where it finds its configuration. That was another thing I used it. Where's the damn configuration file for this? You call LSOF. Oh, there it is in Etsy, whatever.
Yeah, the only other command I've used a ton this week is strace, which
you're on your own there.
Yeah, you're either using it for a lot of fun or a lot of pain. Now, I've had a weird issue with Docker, like the container taking like 10 times the amount of time in a sleep, like consuming 10 times the amount of time on the CPU during a sleep call, whether or not it was running in the container or out. And then it turned out to be that it's something in the seccomp profile, one of the syscalls. So you run it unconfined or in privileged mode, problem disappears.
Did you phone a friend and call Jess Frizzell?
I did. And
awesome.
It still wasn't able to kind of track down. It's got to be like another system call being called by another system call. I eventually gave up. I was like,
if anybody knew about seccomp and Docker, it would be Jess.
Yeah, I told her I knew she had fun with stuff like that, and I didn't think she thought fun was the proper word for it. And it can be fun to dig into these things sometimes because you always come out the other side learning a lot more. But on the other hand, when you have deadlines to meet, you end up more stressed than anything. Okay, so did we have anything else we wanted to talk about before we close out the show for today?
I can't think of anything.
Me neither.
We're all over the map today. A good show.
That's been fun.
It's the ADHD edition of Go Time FM.
It's I forgot to take my Adderall edition. So with that, I want to thank everybody who's still on the show. And Blake, if you listen to this when it's recorded, I want to thank you again for coming on the show. Thanks to everybody who's listening live and interacting with us through Slack. And thank you to all the listeners who will be listening once this episode's released. Huge shout out to our sponsors, Linode and Code School, for making this happen, especially kind of Linode for being the provider of our new changelog system. And again, if you have not seen that site, please go look at it because it is awesome and everybody worked really hard. And we should put in the show notes links to people's Twitter handles so everybody can thank all the people responsible for making it happen.
And don't forget Fastly for their awesome CDN and for making the wise decision to hire Carlisia.
That's our favorite part of all, is that they hired Carlisia.
Well, I want to say that I put the GopherCon Brazil website on the Fastly network, which, by the way, they are comping it, so it's free.
Wow.
And there is this site called webpagetest.org where you plop your URL and you get grades for different aspects of your website, and mostly has to do with speed. And you went from an F to a A. It was amazing. I didn't even tweak anything on the Fastly side because there are a lot of things you can tweak. I just added the CDN. So there we go. Fastly is awesome.
Wow. Now I'm testing gophercon.com right now because I got to know.
Test all the things. This is awesome.
That's cool.
All right. So where did I leave off?
You were congratulating the panel and thanking the listeners, and
yes,
I don't know.
And then if you have not subscribed already, GoTime FM, you can subscribe. Eventually, we're going to kind of get a weekly email going out. So make sure to sign up there. Follow us on Twitter if you're not. We're at GoTime FM. If you want to be on the show or have suggestions for topics or guests, please submit an issue on our GitHub repository, which is github.com/GoTimeFM/ping. And I think that is it. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.